Hey guys, welcome back to another devlog. I mean, it kind of is. I guess we are giving an update on our game somewhat towards the end, but I mainly did want to talk about a topic as it relates to games in general. And it's something that we came up against during development, so I just kind of wanted to talk about it here. The topic is specifically relating to good game design and artistic game design. I mean, games are art, that much we can agree on, but there is a sense of friction that often comes up with things that are considered good game design and artistic choices that are made as a part of the design of the game. To illustrate this point, I'd like to bring up a discussion that me and my friend had earlier, talking about a game called Darkwood. If you haven't heard of that game before, it's a fairly unique survival horror game about scavenging by day and hiding by night from all of the terrors of the night. And it's brimming with atmosphere. Honestly, my description does it a great deal of disservice. I'd highly recommend checking it out if you are into the survival horror genre at all. But anyways, that's besides the point. My friend expressed interest in this game, but was put off from purchasing it based on something he saw in a playthrough. The game makes it very clear that nighttime is bad news and that players need to exercise extreme caution because anything that can kill you will kill you for the most part. There is one portion of the game where someone knocks on your door at night, and if you choose not to knock on the door, which the game has kind of taught you to do, it's taught you to question anything that happens in the nighttime, the person knocking on the door gets angry, breaks through the wall, and attacks you. Hey, editing Gopala, coming in here real quick because I forgot to mention something. Part of what happens during this event is that if you don't open the door, then you'll also miss out on some goodies you can get from the person at the door. So that's a little bit of added context here. My friend had a problem with this part because he felt that deliberately making this one portion of the game go against everything that it has taught you up to this point is bad game design. And this is where the conundrum lies, because there is merit to what he said, especially in terms of what most people consider good game design. If your game is designed well, that means the player needs to have agency. That means the player needs to be able to guess some way, essentially be able to guess what the consequences of their actions are, even if they don't have all the answers. But sometimes when you're making art, you don't want to remove the friction between the person viewing the art and the artwork itself, or in this case, the player and the game. The game is supposed to be frustrating. The frustration is a part of what the world of Darkwood is trying to get across. It's dangerous. You can't trust anything. And by having this one moment where the game essentially breaks the rules that it set up itself, the player is left questioning every action they make moving forward. And this works beautifully for the world that Darkwood is building for us. So if games are art, why is there this friction between things that are designed to artistically convey the feelings you want to get across and good game design that's fun for the player? Fun. And this isn't the only place that this kind of thing gets brought up. I think a very common, famous example of this is difficulty and the Souls series or something like Elden Ring. Because a big reason of why the games don't have a difficulty slider is because the difficulty is inherent to the experience. It's inherent to the experience and the feeling that From Software wants to get across. They want the game to be a challenge. They want it to be a challenge so that the player has a feeling of accomplishment and achievement once they overcome the challenge. And this would be diminished if they did add a difficulty option. So how does this pertain to our game? Well, in Downer, when he's telling the stories and you're playing through his shoes through the dream sequences, your goal is to stay awake. Because a core tenet, a core theme of the game is active listening, and staying awake is listening so that you can actually hear what Downer is saying and learn more about them as a person. And in order to enhance this, the way we initially wanted to design the game was that if you fail to stay awake in the dream sequence, you skip that sequence entirely and move to a different scene. Because technically, that means you dozed off and you missed that part and you weren't actively listening. But this wouldn't be very fun gameplay for a puzzle game especially, right? In a game where you need to solve puzzles, you need to figure things out, but the punishment for messing something up is missing that entire scene of the story is very harsh, because that means in order for you to get the full experience of the game, you're gonna have to essentially either play through that whole night again or play the whole game again. And the way we were thinking about the game, it just wasn't designed for that. So initially, we made the concession to give up that idea, even though it did play into our artistic theme of active listening, where if you failed to listen, you only get the one chance and you don't have takesies backsies. But we were willing to part with that for the sake of making our game more fun or playable. But let's just say the story doesn't end there. Cut to a couple of weeks later. For our experimental film class, me and Darian went to see a movie called Eno, directed by Gary Hustwit. And it might be hands down one of the most inspiring films I've ever seen. Not only in general, but for our game specifically. And here's why. We've been toying around with the idea ever since the start that instead of having the order of each sequence you play through each night being set by us, the game developers, it being affected by the player's actions. But we talked about it, and it felt like it was too much for the scope of our project, because that means we would have to make way more scenes, we would have to create a system that actually lets the player's actions affect which scenes are played at which points, and this just felt like an untenable undertaking for the timeline that we set for ourselves for the game, which was initially to have it completely done by the end of December. But then we watched Eno. What's special about Eno is that it's a movie that is different each time that you watch it in theaters. And that was already kind of like a mind-blowing thing coming into it. We got a chance to do a Q&A with the director. He was actually there at our screening, and it was great to learn how he did it. But that movie is essentially a portrait of Brian Eno, the legendary producer and artist, and it's done through this unconventional means, through this means of almost memory-like, different scenes connecting to other scenes based on an algorithm that Hustwit's team had developed. And this clicked with us instantly, because not only was Brian Eno's ideas on the creative process inspiring, the idea of making a film like this, of form and function marrying together so brilliantly, and actually making the system and it playing out as well as it did, made me not want to sacrifice like the vision of our game for an arbitrary timeline we set up for ourselves. We think having a system like Eno's, an algorithm where each time you play through a night it's different, and the player's choices affecting the order and the sequence of the scenes of Downer's life you see, could work just as well for our game, where you're trying to understand Downer's life as it does for a documentary about Brian Eno. And it was just this beautiful moment of, why don't we do that? So that's what we're doing. Our new goal is to have a demo be released with this system, this algorithm that we're gonna write, which we planned on calling the Enode system as a little homage to Eno the film. But we plan on having a demo out with this system in place by December, by our original like due date that we set for ourselves for the finished game. And instead, if we spend the time from now to then to write a larger story, create way more scenes, and create the systems we need proper, we can probably create something that's much closer to the ideal vision for our game, maybe later next year, like halfway through next year. And yeah, it's just an exciting change, because, I mean, it's both exciting and a bit terrifying, because the scope of the project just like increased tenfold essentially. There's so many more ideas we need to implement, but it's exciting. I'm honestly stoked on where this game is going, and hopefully it's something that you guys are going to want to play. That's really what we're trying to do here. So yeah, thank you all so much for tuning in, and hopefully we can start uploading more videos about our more specific design processes coming forward. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye-bye.